Thank you. Thank you very much. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today. And yes, I'm speaking English, so my Portuguese is not as great, so definitely need the headset for this one. All right. I've spent the last 25 years, I've been a chief digital, chief data, chief marketing, and chief innovation officer. So over that period of time, I used to talk about how technology was disrupting a particular industry. Now it's less about disruption and it's more about convergence. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the role that AI is playing in transforming not only business, but also our lives, as well as from a behavioral standpoint. Now, before I talk about the future, I like to talk a little bit about the past. So I grew up in the late 70s, so I'm a Gen Xer. Loved the original Star Wars. It was one of the first movies that I saw. All of my friends wanted to be Luke Skywalker or Han Solo. I liked the droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO, and how they enabled the journey every step of the way. But growing up in the 1980s, this was more of what robots looked like during that period of time. Not quite to the level of C-3PO. So now, heading into the 90s and the early 2000s, how many of you were using the original Motorola Razr? Yeah? Show of hands? Yeah, I see a few hands, yeah. Remember trying to text with that, the 2 letters and the, trying to get that? It's very, very, very difficult. But something happened in 2007 that was transformational. It was the launch of the first iPhone. But I argue the transformation didn't actually come with the iPhone. The transformation came with the launch of the App Store. That's what really began to give us control over our experiences. This is the key part. Now, we have basically over 2 billion applications have been downloaded, but we now all have an expectation of control. And I'm going to talk about that. So our attention spans have decreased 25% since the year 2000. It's gone from 12 seconds to 8.25 seconds. Now, I remember having to get up, change the channel on the TV, and there may have only been 3 channels. Now, there's an infinite number of entertainment options for you. And that also, it also impacts our kids. These are my 3 kids. So this is Gavin, Audrey, and Grant. They're part of Gen Z. So Gen Z is 1996 to 2010. So they're part of what I like to call the social media generation. They've grown up with technology. It's just an enabler of every aspect and every part of their lives. And their expectations of technology have began to impact how our experiences for our customers and our businesses have come to fruition. Everything tied to digital commerce, a lot of the topics and comments that we've talked about over the last day or so. Now, with Gen Alpha, this will be one of the first generations growing up with AI. Things have to be rethought. Education systems, how they're going to be enabled by these tools, have to fundamentally change, where AI is going to be a big part of all of our lives, including this specific generation. Now, I've covered the eyes of the innocent here. So any Pixar movie fans out there? Yeah? WALL-E? Yeah? I've done research across every single generational cohort. And what I can tell you, from Generation Alpha all the way to boomers, the number one reason why people are open to adopting intelligent systems, it's ease and convenience. That is a really key driver and a big driver for why we're seeing such an explosion around the use of AI in business. All right. How many of you use ChatGPT? Let's see, show of hands. Yeah? Yeah? ChatGPT users? Oh, I see some here, some here. It's okay. It's a safe space. Half hand raised. It's okay. It's all right. What I can tell you is that I get asked a lot, is AI a trend or a fad? Is it something that's just going to come and go? It's fundamentally transforming how we work. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to explain the differences between traditional AI, generative AI, and really get into how it works, because it's important to understand how it's going to evolve your business moving forward. And by the end of the conversation, we're going to get very much into the details around how you operationalize AI for your business, get into some of the value creation and some of those other core pieces. All right. One of the first questions I'm always asked when we talk about this is AI going to take over? You think of maybe the Terminator or Ultron or something else like this. That's actually called the Frankenstein complex. to where we have sometimes an innate fear of mechanical or systems taking over. But the reality is, we're in a golden age of AI right now. The amount of accessibility we have to these tools is like never before. The amount of cloud computing, the amount of data. Data is like oil for AI. So as we begin thinking about this piece of it, I've been working with AI and AI systems since 2015. And I can tell you, at that time, it was very difficult. The amount of data I had to have to train a model, the ability to basically put together the infrastructure to take and drive this forward. But something fundamentally changed in 2017. And that was the launch of the transformer architecture. But before we get there, AI is a lot older than we think it is. It actually originated in World War II in terms of some of the systems that we're actually looking at for code breaking. Now, talking about traditional AI, I like to explain this because I feel it's very important to understand the differences. So machine learning, you'll have heard that term, machine learning. Think about it like if you give a book to the AI to learn with all the answers, and it begins to train. Machine learning is simply human-coded algorithms. Most of AI prior to 2017 was actually based on machine learning. Prior to that was expert systems. Now, there's also deep learning. Deep learning is a little different. This is like if you give a puzzle with the picture to the model, and it begins to try to figure it out and trains itself. This is how a lot of the social media networks work. Now, the thing that most people don't understand, we talked about ease and convenience, but AI is already everywhere in your lives and in your consumers' lives. We have more computing power in our pockets right now than the Apollo 11 mission had going to the moon. Those guidance systems could process 40,000 basically iterations per second. Now, your smartphone can do 2 billion. So the amount of compute power that we have, it's in our cars. Anyone ever used lane assist or any type of, as you're backing up, self-driving cars, TikTok? Okay, any TikTok users in the room? I know there are a few. Okay, half hand raise. TikTok is actually one of the larger AI companies on the planet as well. What they're actually doing is every interaction with the platform, they're taking all the preferences and behaviors and kind of analyzing and assessing that. And so the For You page is actually fully AI generated. Now, the reason we're all here, it's also impacting shopping, specifically the grocery and the supermarket space. We're going to get very deep into what people are doing within the industry, how it's impacting, the specific use cases that they're actually talking about. So we'll get to that point. But the other thing from an expectation perspective and a control perspective, what you're seeing on the screen right now is you're seeing, this is Nike, and on the left-hand side is a contextual agent. This is Bing. Actually, I'm asking questions while I'm shopping. So the ability to have a shopping assistant to help me get additional details is something. And this is why this is incredibly important. I saw on the screen yesterday, there was a conversation around digital commerce. Digital commerce is fundamentally changing because of AI. The human is not always going to be at the center of the experiences that you're putting together. It may be going to an algorithm. How you think about that, how search works traditionally, is you look at all the past behavior, you put it together, it comes up on a search page, you try to rank as high as you can. How search is evolving, it's going to be based on the freshness of the content, the structure of the information, and more of a natural language and less keyword stuffing. So in essence, one algorithm is going to be talking to another. How you structure your data is going to be incredibly important. The other side of it too, we talk a lot about AI, but what's actually going to be transforming is the seamless connection between physical and digital, even in how we shop. This is essentially Google Lenses. So anyone using the Google app, you can touch the camera right now, and you can get contextual information about pretty much anything in the world around you, including products. So again, as younger generations are using the camera as a way to interact and interface with the world, it's incredibly important that we realize that we begin to shift the modalities for how we work, from desktop and mobile to voice, vision, touch, all of the other core experiences. AI is going to accelerate those experiences now. And also from a creative standpoint. So as we begin talking about generative AI, this is a key point. Generative meaning creation of something new. Text, image, video. We'll touch on a few of those examples here today as well. So you can reimagine creativity. And I've seen some great slides from some of the presentations as I walk around. Some of you are definitely fans of using image generation platforms. But as we get into this, the text-to-image space, there's been a lot of movement and discussion around text-to-image. And as we get into this specific piece, you can see the level of sophistication and detail continuing to move forward within some of these platforms. But the real piece that I wanted to focus on here today, well, actually I did want to show this. This is Sora. This is kind of the next evolution from OpenAI. What you're seeing on the screen is you're seeing historical footage of California during the gold rush. And this is all generated via AI based on the prompt. The prompt is what is important here for each of us to understand. A prompt is using natural language to then determine the input for the large language model to give us something back. So how we structure the question in natural language has a significant impact on what we get back from a result standpoint. So as we begin thinking about the rise of ChatGPT, this is the second fastest adoption to 100 million users that we've ever seen, period. There's only one application that got there faster. Anyone want to have a guess? Anyone? I'll give you a hint. I'll just tell you. It's Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is the only one that actually got there a little bit faster. Anybody still playing? Yeah? Yeah? Up some hands. All right, I'll take that. The other thing that we have to understand is that it's being trained on the open web. OpenAI calls it the pile. All of the core information that they're taking from the web, from code repositories, documents, all of those core things are being put into a corpus of information that's comprised of billions of different parameters. So the reason that you can have such an in-depth conversation with some of these tools for those who've played with them is because of that. Now, the key part here is the natural language piece of this. That's going to be a consistent theme. Remember I talked about ease and convenience. The easier we make it for either our customers to interact when they're in the store with a potential AI avatar or an application or whatever else it is, the easier that we can make it to understand and use, the better it is. Now, we also use reinforcement learning, so there's a human in the loop. How ChatGPT works, so I talked a little bit about the transformer architecture. The big difference, just to make it as simple as possible, older AI would look at one word at a time. The way that ChatGPT works, in the transformer architecture, it looks at everything all at once and builds correlations. So it's making guesses based on what you're putting in on what it's going to give back to you. Now, as we're moving forward, we want to move not only from the correlation to causal AI. That's a whole different next wave. We'll talk a little bit about that on the future side of things. Now let's start talking about impact to you and your businesses. That's great for everyone else. The first part is around the accessibility to information. What I want to talk about here is that generative AI is a great democratizer to access and insights. I've seen an incredible amount of data and information visualized and on display. What I can tell you is that the core piece that is the most important here is around the access to insights quickly. And we have to think, AI is an enabler. It is a specific tool. So I get asked all the time, will AI replace me? Will AI replace my job? What I can tell you is AI will not replace you, but someone who uses the tools will. That applies to business, that applies to your competitors, because what it actually does is it gives you access to information to drive real-time decisioning significantly faster. And faster time to decision equals a faster competitive advantage. So it is incredibly important. There's also been a shift. So I've been in the space for about 25 years now, since the dot-com days. The last 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot of discussion around digital transformation, data transformation, how I work with big data, all the other core things. What I see coming now, it's less about digital and data transformation, and it's more about intelligence augmentation. How can I use these tools to make myself even better? That's really the focus. Now, when I talk to different companies and organizations, and I've met with 90 different companies in the last 12 months, 90. And what I can tell you, the number one fear that people have within these organizations is, how will I be trained? How will I be upskilled to use these tools? The other thing that I see, there are already thousands of people using these tools, and the organizations aren't really even putting any type of proper governance or process in place to mitigate risk. So that's another part we'll talk about. I had a CIO from a very large global beverage company come to me recently. And they're like, I have 1,000 employees using ChatGPT. Do I shut it off? Do I write a policy? What do I do? Where do I get started? So Dennis and I will talk a lot about getting started towards the end here as well. The other part, though, is the superpower around real-time decisioning. That is so critical. We already touched on that. Now, where do I see companies, especially in this space, investing? There are 4 primary areas where organizations are beginning to organize around these specific tools. The first area is around governance, because a lot of this is around how do I mitigate risk? There are risks and there are benefits associated with implementing these specific tools. Understanding and knowing where those specifically are and how to manage that process is incredibly important. This applies to how you write your policies. This applies to third parties that you're potentially working with. You have to rethink how you're writing your contracts because they may be applying generative AI tools or specific models that may not abide by how you want to limit risk. The other side of it's around the operationalization of AI. This is how companies are structuring. I have not seen a technology that impacts so many areas of the business as I have over the last year. This impacts every functional area of the business, from marketing to supply chain to finance to human resources. And how you have to organize yourself to be prepared for it is completely changing faster than anything that we've seen. The other side of it's around build. So there are a lot of organizations experimenting. I'd say 70 to 80% of the companies I work with across the globe are experimenting in some way with AI and generative AI. So what I see happening is you want to experiment. You want to figure out, how do I prioritize all of the things I could do? How do I determine what value will be created from these specific tools? And then how can I then move along the process to try to get into production? So the build side is important, but it's not the only thing. Over the past month or two now, I'm starting to see the move from experimentation to moving it into production. And the key part to really remember here is you have to be able to take and think about transforming as a whole, transforming the marketing function as a whole, the supply chain function as a whole, the finance function as a whole, and thinking about them from end to end, because the business process, the upskilling, the technology, the governance, they're all interrelated. This is transforming how we work, how we structure, and how we're going to maximize revenues moving forward. The flip side of this too, though, there's a lot of legislation around responsible AI. So responsible AI, if you think about what's happening in the EU, there are things happening in the United States with executive orders. What I'm seeing here is it really comes down to 4 core areas that you have to consider. It's the transparency of your data. It's the explainability of your models. So as you're using different generative AI tools, one thing you're going to have to do is also report back on the use of those tools. There's kind of the fairness and accountability associated with this, and finally, how do you eliminate bias? So the legal side goes hand in hand with some of the experimentation here as well. And then finally, as you're rethinking, the importance of prioritization is really key. You cannot do everything. There's so many ways that these technologies can be applied to the organization. Having a very clear focus and a methodology in terms of how you're going to actually prioritize these things is incredibly key. But thank you so very much for having me.